If thought dominates human experience, why does every thought arise from something that is not thought? This question exposes a paradox at the heart of modern understandings of consciousness. We usually assume that thinking is the defining feature of awareness. To be conscious, in this view, is to have thoughts, images, memories, an inner dialogue. Mental activity is treated as the core substance of awareness itself. Yet, when we observe our own experience carefully, this assumption begins to fracture. Thoughts appear and disappear, sometimes rapidly, sometimes slowly, but awareness itself does not seem to flicker on and off with them. Even more strikingly, silence is noticed only when thought pauses. The very recognition of silence implies that it was already present, unnoticed beneath mental activity. This leads to a different conclusion. Thought does not create awareness. It emerges within a pre-existing silence. Ibn Arabi articulates this insight with unusual precision. For him, silence is not the absence of cognition, but the ground from which cognition arises. This silence is not mystical emptiness. It is a fundamental ontological and cognitive condition. From a psychological perspective, modern life intensifies identification with thought. Many people experience cognitive overload, persistent rumination, and stress driven by incessant inner dialogue. Mental noise becomes so constant, the depth of awareness beneath it is rarely felt. Neuroscience helps explain this. Pattern, default mode, network hyperactivity is associated with excessive self-referential thinking, replaying the past, anticipating the future, narrating the self-attentional. Capture makes it difficult to disengage from mental content once it arises. Cognitive fusion occurs when individuals identify themselves with their thoughts. Rather than seeing thoughts as events in awareness, these mechanisms produce recognizable symptoms. Silence becomes uncomfortable, mental quiet triggers anxiety rather than relief. Many people seek constant stimulation. Media, conversation, background noise, all to avoid being alone with unstructured awareness. Neurologically, the brain prioritizes predictive thought to maintain a sense of control. However, this leads to a core limitation. Awareness is reduced to its contents, rather than recognized as the context in which those contents appear. What is needed is a framework that distinguishes awareness itself from thinking. Activity. Ibn Arabi provides such a framework by grounding silence at the level of being. His concern is not how to stop thinking, but how to understand the conditions under which thinking occurs. It is important to correct common misconceptions. Ibn Arabi does not advocate suppressing thought, nor does he promote mental blankness. Thought, for him, is a valid and necessary mode of articulation. What he challenges is the assumption that thought is primary. His core principle is that silence precedes and contains all articulation. Thought depends on silence, not the reverse. Silence is the condition that allows anything to appear at all historically. This position anticipates phenomenology and modern studies of non-conceptual awareness. It also aligns with contemporary distinctions between context and content, as well as research into meta-awareness, awareness of experience rather than immersion. In it, Ibn Arabi's first foundational distinction is precise. Silence is not a state, It is a condition, a state comes and goes. A condition enables states to arise in the first place. Thought, emotion, and perception are states. Silence is the condition that allows them to appear. Conceptually, thoughts arise within silence. Silence is not something that follows thinking. It is what thinking appears in cognitive science. This corresponds to background awareness, a form of non-objectifiable consciousness that is present regardless of specific mental content. A simple example illustrates this clearly. When one thought ends and another has not yet begun, the pause is immediately noticeable. That pause is not created by the absence of thought. It is revealed by it. The pause must already be present in order to be perceived at all. The insight is straightforward but often overlooked. Silence must already exist for thought to be perceived as thought. Without silence, there would be no contrast, no recognition, no awareness of mental activity. The key takeaway is that thought is secondary, silence is primary. Ibn Arabi explains the dynamic between silence and thought through the concept of tajalli. Analytically, tajalli refers to the way reality continuously reveals itself through forms. Thoughts are one such form. This creates an apparent paradox. Thoughts change constantly, one replaces another, yet silence remains stable. The changing content does not disrupt the underlying ground. Scientific parallel can be found in neural activity. Neural firing patterns fluctuate rapidly, but they do so against a relatively stable baseline of brain function. The baseline is not erased by activity. It makes activity possible in experience. Different thoughts arise in the same field of awareness. One thought may be analytical, another emotional, another imaginal. The field in which they appear does not fragment or move. A common misconception is that silence is something achieved after thinking stops. Ibn Arabi rejects this. Silence is not an outcome, it is the medium. Thought is best understood as a modulation of silence, not an interruption of it. To explain how silence can be recognized, Ibn Arabi introduces the concept of the heart in his usage. The heart is not an emotional center, it is a faculty of direct awareness. The distinction here is structural. The intellect analyzes and fragments experience into parts. The heart integrates experience as a whole. Where the intellect sequences, the heart apprehends. Neuroscience offers a useful parallel in integrative awareness. Multiple cognitive networks synchronize rather than compete. Whole field processing allows for immediate understanding without step-by-step reasoning. An everyday example makes this clear. Sometimes one understands the significance of a situation immediately, without being able to explain it verbally. The understanding is real, even though it is not yet conceptualized. This clarifies an important misconception. Silence is not anti-intellectual, it is pre-intellectual. The heart recognizes silence as intelligible presence. Not as absence of meaning. Ibn Arabi further refines this framework with the concept of barzakh. An interface or threshold. Barzakh names the zone between unarticulated awareness and conceptual thought. Cognitive science identifies similar phenomena in pre-verbal cognition and insight thresholds. Often, one knows what to say before words form. The meaning is present before articulation. In such moments, silence and thought are not. Opposed silence holds meaning in a non-dis form. Thought translates that meaning into language. The insight here is crucial. Silence and thought are adjacent modes of the same reality. Silence is not the negation of thinking, it is the reservoir from which thinking draws. If silence is so fundamental, why does it often feel uncomfortable? Ibn Arabi's answer points to identity. Over time, identity becomes attached to thinking. The sense of self is maintained through narrative, evaluation, and mental commentary. Psychologically, silence threatens this structure. It can evoke fear of ego dissolution or loss of narrative control. When thinking quiets, the usual markers of identity become less prominent. This leads to a common misconception that silence erases identity. Ibn Arabi rejects this. Silence does not remove the self. It removes the dominance of discursive thought. The key distinction is precise. Absence of thought does not equal absence of self. Discomfort signals a loss of cognitive dominance, not actual danger. The system is reorganizing, not collapsing. Applied practically, this framework changes how silence is approached. Silence does not require stopping thoughts, it requires recognizing what remains while thoughts continue. One practical shift is observing thoughts without trying to suppress them, while simultaneously noticing the silence that remains present during thinking. This reduces cognitive struggle rather than increasing it. Such recognition is associated with reduced default mode network overactivation and improved emotional regulation. Awareness becomes less reactive and more stable. This has clear applications in stress management, focus, creativity, and existential anxiety. For example, instead of forcing mental quiet, one can pause attention between thoughts naturally, noticing the continuity of awareness. The result is greater clarity, psychological stability, cognitive flexibility, without effortful control. The central insight can now be stated clearly. Silence is not beneath thought in sequence, as if it comes before or after, it is beneath thought in structure. It is the condition that allows thought to exist at all. Reframed this way, the idea becomes exact. Silence is the ground of mind, not its absence. Awareness is not produced by thinking. Thinking appears within awareness. Ibn Arabi offers a disciplined and rational model in which silence is recognized not as emptiness, but as intelligible presence. In this model, clarity does not come from accumulating thoughts. It comes from understanding the silent ground that already sustains them.